Sabrina 70s comic issue 6. Hilda says that Sabrina is smiling all the time and her head's full of nice thoughts. And for some reason, Zelda agrees with her that that's an awful attitude for a witch. I thought Zelda was supposed to contrast Hilda, to be actually interesting. She kept telling Hilda to lay off her earlier. She didn't want her to make Sabrina upset. This just doesn't make any sense, and I'm so glad the 90s comic did away with this. Because it's just a cliche holding the comic back from what it's trying to do. Zelda, instead of Hilda, said that Sabrina might snap out of it if she met a nice warlock. Hilda says that's a weird idea, and she likes it. Of course it's a weird idea, because it's an idea guaranteed to fail. Hilda moves something in a cauldron while planning on getting in touch with Coven headquarters, who would send someone to influence Sabrina. A man shows up, with Hilda not in the panel somehow, and already Zelda says he's perfect. Probably because she thinks he's handsome. Hilda says that Sabrina would rather ride a Honda than a broom. So the guy wants to get her to see the dark side of life. And since this is an actually good comic that cares about keeping the characters consistent, he's gonna fail. I don't even know his name. Apparently it's Hex. He uses magic, but it's so pointless what he does that I don't actually feel like mentioning it. Somehow not many witches can clone themselves. It's a spell that'd be pretty easy to visualize. It's so obvious that Hilda's plan has to fail for the sake of the status quo. So I hope the story is interesting enough to make up for how pointless it's gonna be. Zelda says that if anyone can make Sabrina excited about being a witch, he can. Totally ignoring that she already casts magic all the time. So of course she's excited about it. Hilda wants Sabrina to cast spells around town with Hex, and maybe at each other. Sabrina doesn't want new outfits and would rather be herself. And while she admits that his magic is impressive, she'd rather just walk like everyone else. I guess she really likes exercise, but she should say that. He says that's cramping his style, but agrees just to humor her. That's smart of him. Sabrina asks what Hex is gonna do with all that talent. He says he wants to be the best. She asks him why, making me wonder if she's gonna talk him out of it. She could also say, I think you're already the best. He says that's an exciting life with lots of laughs and a great sense of power. Good thing he won't abuse that power by brainwashing her to be in love with them and ending the series. I guess he's nice enough to be above that. Sabrina's told that he won't do anything for people, and just wants to terrorize them, with no explanation, like people do a lot of bad things. He can't use magic against some innocent stranger, because Sabrina made him fall over with her magic. She says that witches should be good, and he says that mischief is his instinct. She did just use mischief against him though. He says that he's heard the love bit before, and he says he doesn't need love because he's a warlock. If all of the witches had that attitude, they would have gone extinct by now. Sabrina says there's nothing in the world as powerful as love. He just thinks he's getting nauseous, as she doesn't explain to him what she meant by that. Like, people will want to help you if they love you. She says that he'll never know real stomach flip-flops until he tastes love. So she forcibly kisses him just to prove a point. He's told that love will always come out on top of evil. The story ends with Hilda somehow being upset about him being converted, insisting that this is their biggest setback since Salem. As Hex says that the more you give, the more you have. I considered calling this guy Scourge sarcastically before I found out his name because he said the dark side of life. But apparently it wasn't so cliche after all. It's confusing that he's like this, but it's also more sympathetic. So it's actually better written. It doesn't make up for him being frustrating for most of the story. All he did was try to victimize someone with no explanation. And I'm guessing this will be the last we'll ever see of him. So wouldn't he just turn on love right away because the relationship won't last? In the next story, Sabrina says their old grandfather clock must be fast. And Hilda says the clock runs on witch power and is always correct. So Sabrina's watch must be wrong. Sabrina's supposed to meet Harvey at 1 o'clock when her hair isn't set, and she has to pick up her dress at the cleaners. Naturally, Hilda's confused, because if she just used her powers, she wouldn't have these problems. Uncharacteristically, she's polite enough not to tell her that and rub it in her face, and instead tells her to hurry. Sabrina runs outside while keeping her hair covered, and she can't get to the cleaners because it's closed for lunch and won't reopen until 1 o'clock. She asks what she's gonna do now, even though it's so obvious she could just solve this all with magic. She can see her dress on the rack inside, so she figures the owner wouldn't mind her using magic to open the door and taking the dress out, as long as she left the money there. Did every store have surveillance cameras back in the 70s? It's so frustrating that the owner comes back when he's not supposed to be here. He even accuses her because her hand's in the cash register. Why didn't she just put the money on the table? He doesn't believe her, which is an extra bit of frustration that we didn't need. He thinks the only way he can find out if she's telling the truth is by taking forever counting all the day's receipts. Wouldn't she not leave her receipt anyways? This is so frustrating. Why didn't she just use magic to give herself a clone of the dress and the cleaners? This man shouldn't even be here. He insists that she's not going anywhere because he's an asshole, and she finally sticks it to him by teleporting away. I mean, even if she was trying to steal from him, he stopped her. Fortunately, he assumes that Sabrina was never here, and he imagined the whole thing from eating too much pepperoni and jelly sandwiches. Really? Why did Sabrina think he's a nice man? Sabrina's told by Harvey over the phone that they'll have to forget about the show today because if she's not ready now, they won't be able to get to the theater in time because the show starts in 5 minutes. Oh, never mind. He fortunately plans on going on a date with her today anyways. That makes more sense if he likes her so much. I was gonna say it was unrealistic for him to give up on a date with her. So he offers to buy her a malt at Pop Tate's at 2 o'clock. Hilda tells Sabrina that she should be wearing a witch watch, like all witches wear. Hilda makes a pun and laughs and gives one to her. She says it's a pretty watch, as I hope that wearing the watch won't backfire on her somehow. Hilda offers to get her a witch watch of her own. Why didn't she do that a long time ago? This whole plot wouldn't have happened. Sabrina waits at Pop Tate's for 25 minutes, and Harvey says his watch must be running slow just like hers was. She outright says to his face that he needs a witch watch. And sadly, the story ends with Sabrina breaking the fourth wall, asking the audience if they'd like Harvey to have one. Isn't it obvious we'd like him to be on time? In a comedy page, Sabrina asks Harvey to give Hilda some thumbtacks that she asked Sabrina to buy for her instead of just snapping them up herself. That was out of character. He tells her she's sleeping on the couch, and I guess Harvey misinterpreted Sabrina as wanting Hilda to step on the thumbtacks, because he put them facing up in front of the couch. I guess he assumed even Sabrina would want to prank Hilda, because Hilda's so mean sometimes. But wouldn't that just make her too scared to prank her? This story would have made more sense if it was Reggie who did this. Because I'm doing this makes no sense. In the next comedy page, Hilda laughs at her own reflection, wasting most of the panels, and then tells Sabrina that she thought she said she'd feel like a better person if she learned to laugh at herself. At least it's interesting that Hilda wants to feel like a better person at all. I thought she wanted to be evil. I guess she's not always like that. The next comedy page has Harvey say that his coffee tastes like mud. She tells him to give her a cup so she can make a fresh pot. Don't trust her, so of course she puts actual mud in it. But we don't get to see his reaction to that. Probably because it'd be redundant because he'd react the same way. There's also a comedy page where Harvey asks Sabrina loudly if she's ready yet, because it's getting late, and that startles Hilda off her chair. She tells him not to move and smacks him with a fly swatter, and Harvey assumes she was hitting a fly. She says, "Get what? Next time be a little quiet when you come in this house." This comic kind of makes me feel sorry for Sabrina for having to live with ants like this, who outright wanted to be an evil witch instead of loving her for who she is. If Hilda wasn't so entertaining, I want her to live with anyone else. In the next story, Harvey asks his Uncle Casper why he's closing the amusement park so early, and is told that all of his employees walked out on him. Must have been a really bad boss. Oh, it's because the place is haunted. Rides were starting by themselves, and people came running out of the spook house and museum saying that they were being touched by strange hands, and they heard the wax dummies talk and move. Wouldn't it be more interesting if the art actually showed us all this? Then Casper says he saw strange things happening with no one around, and even the police couldn't find anyone. He complains that if he doesn't make money, he'll be out of business. Harvey says he'll get some kids who will be willing to work, not believing in ghosts or wanting Sabrina to. Why does he say, "Of course you don't," when she said, "No comment"? They hear some laughter from the funhouse, and the merry-go-round turns on. The whole time I was wondering if this was really being done by a witch, like Hilda. Casper says that the gun's so warm from being fired, then Sabrina sees a stereotypical bedsheet ghost. But the supposed ghost clearly has pants and shoes, which Harvey fortunately notices. Sabrina uses magic to make some wind get rid of the bedsheet and reveal the guy who wanted to buy this property. This makes way more sense than ghosts, and it's a twist, so it's creative. And we've already seen ghosts in this comic. He throws a barrel at Harvey and Sabrina and attacks Casper, and runs into the wax museum. Sabrina asks why they can't just call the police and tell them who it was. A supposed wax dummy hits Harvey in the back of the head and threatens Sabrina, who mentions her witchcraft powers out loud. And yet when all the wax dummies move, he thinks the place is haunted instead of saying that she's a witch. She really should have just had a thought bubble here. It's always lame when she says witchcraft powers instead of just powers. It's stilted. So he runs out of the building asking someone to call the police. Why does Sabrina not understand why he was doing all of those things? She shouldn't have to be reminded that he wanted to buy the property. Casper says that the bad guy said he could have made a small fortune because a big corporation wanted to build a high-rise or apartment building here. Wouldn't that be better than an amusement park? Because it'd actually be useful? There's so many people who need homes. If there were too many homes, some of them could be offered for free. Sabrina shouldn't have to be told this obvious fact. Casper says he's sure he'll get what he deserves. Sabrina says that the reason he thought the dummies were after him is that he was feeling guilty and just imagined it. The first story is about, frustratingly, both of Sabrina's aunts wanting to summon an evil witch to be a bad influence on Sabrina. But in a creative twist, Sabrina actually talks him out of his evil ways by kissing him. Apparently he's never been kissed before if that worked. I guess he was always attracted to her, since otherwise he would just be freaked out. And it'd be creepy if he switched the genders. Won't he just go back to his evil ways because she won't date him after this? I hate this story. I don't know why they want Sabrina to abuse her magic. That would be punished, not encouraged. It should have went on for a little longer and shown him going to date a different woman and staying the way Sabrina changed him to be. The second story is about Sabrina running late for a date with Harvey because of her watch. And because she's an idiot, she frustrates me because instead of simply using magic to create a clone of the dress of the cleaners, let alone teleporting to the cleaners immediately, she warps into the building. The owner of the building goes there when he's supposed to be out for lunch, and he accuses her of trying to steal from him because she didn't simply put the money on the desk in front of the cash register. And he tediously doesn't believe her and tries to waste her time. We didn't need to see that crap. None of that would have happened, and that was the whole story. Harvey cancels the date because she's not ready. I guess Hilda told him, and he meets her for another date on the same day, thankfully. Just to reveal that his watch was running late too. Why didn't Sabrina have an accurate which watch a lot earlier? This whole story wouldn't have happened. The final story is about a supposedly haunted amusement park owned by Harvey's uncle. Unfortunately, rather than the plot being contrived, the supposed haunting was just faked by the guy who wanted to buy Casper's property, who wanted to scare its employees away. I'm glad I'm not asking why ghosts were allowed to do that and what took them so long. In Sonic Boom, I was disappointed by there not being ghosts in Eggman's lair for real, because it was such a mundane show. It wasn't taking proper advantage of the sci-fi and fantasy elements of Sonic. Instead, it was just a continuation of the show being boring. This series has already had ghosts in it. It's ironic that the uncle was named Casper, like Casper the Friendly Ghost, in a story about a haunted park with no ghosts. I don't know if that was intentional, or if Casper was a common name back then, and it was just an accident. But either way, this was a good story with a creative twist, where Sabrina makes the wax dummies move to scare the bad guy out of hiding. It's weird priorities to show Harvey's uncle before showing any of his parents, though.